Civilization or Barbarism, an Authentic Anthropology by Dr. Cheikh Anta. It is important to point out the specific traits of the AMP states which allow them to constantly dominate the revolutionary situations that they have bequeathed to the modern states. For it must also be asked why it is more and more difficult to make revolutions in the contemporary states, all of which have the AMP's form and structure. The size of the territory, comprising several cities, even thousands, the complexity of the state machinery, and the centers of decision making are two traits common to the AMP states and the present states, which allow them to adapt to varied and perilous situations. The idea of an AMP state without revolution, without social convulsion, is an error to which theory has accustomed us. Ion Banu shows that peasant revolt was quasi endemic in China, and that in Egypt the decay of the ideological superstructure from the ancient empire onward, as imposing as it was, is reflected in the dialogue of a desperate man with his soul, where it is said that the gods are interested only in the rich. They let evil go unpunished. Therefore, sacrifices are of no use. In the literary text, Truth and Lie, dated from the New Empire, the man who is stripped of his property has to take the law into his own hands without relying on judges, kings, or gods. The adventure of Horus and Seth, New Empire, deals with the problem of justice in the state. Elsewhere, in the legend of the Horus and uh, Beutet, he promises the pharaoh that he will be by his side in case of rebellion. Consequently, at a very early stage, the divine order and the cosmic order cease to be reunited, to be one with the state in the mind of the exploited and insurgent people. The history of all the AMP states is therefore marked by restrained and, in the end, subdued revolts. Thus, it is important to study the different ways state intervention was used to repress the discontent and to reestablish order, if not peace, every time. This also is a trait common among the modern states. Economic intervention is a common means by which modern states re-establish social harmony, one completely alien to the feudal and slave states, founded on private production. The cumulative process for the increase of production by the very fact of its collective base and the free nature of labor is infinitely more important than the private production, quantitatively mediocre, of the feudal and slave states, which a priori allows no increase, no less any technical progress. It would be nonsense to speak of a cumulative increase of the production in Sparta, which is still the most confirmed slave state of all time. The notions of the capacity for the broadening of production in the AMP states and in the slave states have to be reviewed on a more objective basis. Let us add that the formation of the fundamental contradiction of the AMP states is erroneous and ethnocentric, namely, exploitation of a tribal communal property on a class basis. In fact, It is not scientific to confuse, in the same definition, the notion of property during the proto-historic epic of the hawk and the crocodile clans with the idea that the Egyptian of Ramses II epic had about collective ownership of the land after 2,500 years of an integrated national life among the people who presented the strongest cohesion in the history of antiquity. A qualitative leap has taken place, which is not taken into account in the analysis when there is a transition from tribe to nation. The AMP state is born every time that tribes integrate to become a nation in order to survive by taking up a challenge of nature, thanks to a rational organization and a division of labor. Hence, the concepts characterizing the original situation become inappropriate when it is question of analyzing national institutions. It is also the necessity of survival for the whole community that explains the relative speed with which national unity is accomplished in such a precocious manner in order to allow the creation of a territorial state bringing together all of the old gnomes tribal territory out of which thousands of cities will spring up where individuals live completely cut off from the umbilical cord of their former tribes whose memory they may even forget. Property is thus just collective, but it is no longer tribal, for those who work on it are simply individuals who can come from any area of the country. The AMP state, like the modern states, combines public and private interest on a national, not tribal basis in order to blunt the rip of the revolutionary spirit. And this is particularly true for the pharaonic Egypt. But the AMP state, or its administrative machinery, is not to be confused with its leadership class as has been postulated, the terrible practice of the king actually being put to death, so widespread in Black Africa and probably in proto historic Egypt, shows that early on the Africans made a very clear distinction between the state abstract concept of the public entity and its servants to such an extent that the most eminent of them, the king himself, was sacrificed to this state generally every 8 years. And we'll stop there. Continue back with chapter 13, Civilization or Barbarism. I'm Uriel. Hi, sir.